Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And I'm your host, Ronald, Bethea, and you know if you join us on a regular basis, the slogan for this show is "This Power in Numbers," and the Positive Change Purchasing Corporative LLC captures that power for your financial benefit. The Positive Change Purchasing Corporative LLC serves as a blueprint for self-reliance for renewable energy companies, both large and small, along with increasing market share for African and African-American renewable energy companies to address the effects of high energy costs at our historically Black colleges and universities, to utilize Black-owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African and African-American young men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also to educate the African and African-American community locally, nationally, about the economic impacts of climate change and the need for environmental education through Black Talk Radio programs such as Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. Ladies and gentlemen, you also know if you join us on a regular basis that this show is brought to you every week by the National Association of Blacks in Solar. It's also being brought to you once again by the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative and the Black Sports Legends Foundation, BSLF HBCU Solar Radio Talk Show Initiative, and you can get more information on that initiative by logging on to our website at positivechangepc.com. Ladies and gentlemen, if I sound like I have a little excitement in my voice, I do. I have the privilege of having on board a dynamic young African-American gentleman by the name of Nathan Daly, who I am pleased to let my listening audience know he was recently elected to head and take the post which I've held for some past 5 years as president of the National Association of Blacks in Solar. And with that being said, I'm going to bring Nathan right on in because we've got a lot to cover. Because reason why I brought him here, because we know anyone who followed the outcome of the 2024 election, presidential election, and its impact on the clean energy industry, I'm going to sort of set the table a little bit, but I'm not going to be long-winded with it because we did our show last week around this. We looked at the Evergreen Action Group and the Clean Cities American group, and they talked about the impact of the 2024 elections on the renewable energy industry. And that is one of the things, ladies and gentlemen, that we're going to be looking at today in its entirety. We're going to be looking at and drilling down on what they are saying. What does this mean when we look at the fact that over the past 4 years, the Biden administration, through landmark legislation, Build Back Better, and something called the Inflation Reduction Act, which gave rise to a number of initiatives, and it pumped billions of dollars into this new clean energy, what we call the new clean energy economy, which has been booming here in the U.S. for the last 4 years. We've had thousands of jobs that have come to fruition. We've had new manufacturing startups around the CHIPS Act. All of these things have happened. But one of the things that's very, very disturbing to me is that I had the privilege of listening to a very dynamic young brother by the name of Mustafa Ali, who serves at the director of Forestry in Virginia. For years, he served at the EPA. And back in July of this year, June of this year, he was at Bowie State University at an energy conference, and we were talking about the impacts of this bill and just how much money have actually gone to African American entities. And out of $1.7 trillion that have flowed out of the coffers of the 6 federal agencies, less than 2% of that money has gone to African and African American owned businesses, nonprofits, and entities, even though our HBCUs have seen a great deal of monies that came from the Inflation Reduction Act and Build Back Better. It's a drop in the bucket when you're talking about 2% of $1.7 trillion. And with that being said, Brother Daly, welcome to the airways of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America.
Thank you, Mr. Bethea. It's been a privilege, and I'm grateful to be able to be on with you all, and be able to share any insights that may come from the National Association of Blacks in Solar, as well as some understanding on the procurement and some of the other processes and projects that are taking place now. So thank you, Mr. Bethea. I appreciate that very much.
Well, I mean, they had this a survey, which you're familiar with, Nathan, and they put it out back on October 22nd. It went out to media, and because I produced this podcast, and I've been doing this for 6 years now, they sort of got me into the loop, and I was able to sit on the webinar, and I listened very, very attentively. I'm very, very disturbed when you can break down and you go to the map and you can go to each state. Anybody can go to my website at positivechangepc.com. And just for my listening audience, please forgive me, but you know that call-in number is 646-668-2948. Let me repeat that number, 646-668-2948, with the excitement of having Brother Nathan Daly here today, and with the outcome of this election where we have referred to him as COVID-45. Some folks will call him President-elect Donald Trump. I refer to him. That's one he won't live down. It's COVID-45. because he was our president at that time, and President Obama had put safeguards in place, and he sort of blew it up, and we had 60% more people who died in the U.S. than did in the United Kingdom, known as Canada, because the safeguards weren't respected and followed. But with that being said, Nathan, what is your take on these reports? One, you had 900 companies that came out and said, okay, there's $238 billion that's been invested in the economy. There's 600,000 green new jobs investors. When we begin to look at, for example, EPA, they're talking about a part of the Project 25 impact. There's a resolution 5, Article 5, to do away with the EPA. I mean, to me, that's completely off the rails. But this is what we're faced with. And I don't know, because the mainstream media has done such a poor job in really educating the public around what is at stake. And we both can agree, because you just finished driving, I think, from Texas all the way back to our nation's capital, and you visited a number of those small rural communities that have been hit by these disasters. So give me your assessment of what's going on here, Nathan.
Thank you, Mr. Bethea. I think that it's, for those of you who are listening, Mr. Bethea is accurate when he says that there is a concerted effort to reduce a lot of the funding and the opportunities that came with financing projects from the EPA. And also, I think that there is a lot of concern and conversation around the job market. So just give you guys just a quick overview of where we are right now. There's a lot of folks I've been getting calls all morning about what to do now, how to move these projects along, and what is going to be the outcome, and what can my investors expect coming in the next 2025 and so on. And I'm just gonna highlight 3 points that I just want to share right now, Mr. Bethea, and for this podcast. And the first is I'm going to say asset protection. Most importantly, you've got to make sure that whatever private investment that has already been put into your project, I think what we see right now, there is a necessary move that will have to come from investors and stakeholders, and including those who put sweat equity or gifts of equity on the project, on the land, to start to learn what the protection asset options you have available. It's important and overall to consider that most of the funding and financing opportunity that came out under the Biden administration required cost savings or cost matching and so in several regards. Now, what that means for your project, and I'm going to speak specifically on one of the cities that I was able to get to down in the Mississippi area that seems to be really in need of the funding and really preparing itself for those funding opportunities, was Mount Bayou, Mississippi. As I was there, I learned very quickly that part of the struggle in obtaining the financing was being able to get that cost sharing. And so what I want to tell everybody today is that the election that you see now and the results of that election, they can have an impact if you are not prepared to understand what those procurement processes and some of those requirements are. And you will see that kind of come out in some of the literature that under the circular arguments in the Office of the White House, Management and Budget. Okay, so the first thing I would do is I would look for asset protection as a means to start to align myself with whatever those policies that are going to be implemented on day one when he gets in the office. I would already be prepared in that regard. The second thing I would do is I really would take some time to review some of the ideas that came out of the Heritage Foundation. Now, I'm not one to tell people that that all the jobs are going to be cut, Mr. Bethea, because I don't see that this large investment over the past 3 years is outside of the scope of the needs of the American people in job creation, and I think it would serve the interest, quite frankly, of the administration coming in. to keep those. So I don't know if they would be immediately defunding all of those opportunities that were awarded, but I do see that in the Project 2025, there are concerted efforts in the political think tanks to remove some of the financing that came under the DOE program, removing almost $90 billion in financing according to the appropriations of that Project 2025. You're looking at an additional $260 billion in reduction to the current lending capacity, which is important because this goes directly to the DOE. We do see cuts, offered by some of the Republicans that they want to defund almost in the tune of $1.5 billion on some of the energy efficiency and renewable energy funding lines. So that's, if you want to go check that out, it would be on that page 379 of that Project 2025, and it's under the EERE. That's the reduce the EERE funding side, and I think that's really important right now because we do see a large group of people investing into this. So that's why I go back to that asset protection. And then the last thing I would say is that I think the biggest challenge that this election will present will be in the form of some of the apprenticeship programs that we see in renewable energy. I think that will take a major hit because we do know that part of the training that the HBCUs and the funding that have been allotted was designed so that we can bolster that. And I think that if you are going to continue that funding, I would right now start to consider adding some elements of helping folks to understand some of the natural energy resources that are available, because I do know that they are going to be looking to reallocate some of that funding into looking for natural energy sources that come straight here from America.
Well, Nate, we've been joined by Tony Henderson here. Brother Henderson.
Good morning, Ron. How are you today?
Well, I'm glad you were able to. I was able to find you and get you in here because I definitely wanted you. Let my listening audience know who Mr. Henderson is. Mr. Henderson is a true trailblazer. He is in the field of investment in the renewable energy sector, and he's done major projects all over this country. His firm is Imbalance. And you can go to our website at positivechangepc.com, and you can stroll down on our front page to our affiliate partner section, and you'll find Mr. Henderson's organization listed, and you can click directly on that link and go directly into his website and see all of the outstanding projects, Tony, that your company has done. Now, you've been listening to Nathaniel, and I agree 2,000% with what he has had to say, because I'm finding out. My phone's been blowing up this morning too, with people calling me, well, what does this mean to the solar industry? And I want to get your take on this, Tony. Would you sort of share a little bit about your company, your background, and how you see this thing playing out? Because we're in some different waters now, because nobody had an idea that this thing was going to come, this election was going to come down, and it's going to have a tremendous impact on the federal agencies. And I want to know how many of them are going to be left standing, because we have our offices like equity and diversity in the Department of Energy, and that was only there because of an executive order. So I don't even know if these people are going to have a job at DOE. So what's your take, Tony?
I think it's a new world, it's a paradigm shift that's going to be hitting the energy industry over the next 4 years. And it's going to take a few months for it to begin, obviously. But it's going to be dramatic. And I concur with Nate and his statement about asset protection. I think people need to fundamentally understand that some of the renewable energy game is definitely going to change. But it's not going to change renewable energy enterprises as a whole. By that I mean there's still hundreds of billions of dollars ready to move into the renewable energy marketplace, whether it be solar energy, wind, energy efficiency. Up until now, a lot of that money has been on the sidelines waiting for a lot of this energy equity money to reach the states, to reach the communities, and they wanted to leverage it so they could actually do more programs with the private sector money they had. I'm in 15 community change grants around the United States, and we still anticipate those dollars, those funds, being allocated to these projects, communities under the existing budget. But what's changed is now, while many of the communities, and Nathan, maybe Nathan's still along with us, John?
Yeah, Nathan, he's still with us, brother. We're listening with bated breath, brother, because you dropping some information, and our people need to hear what both of you gentlemen have to say. That's why I wanted both of you on today, because as I said, my phone is blown up, man, since 6 this morning. People calling me, and I'm saying, wait a minute, bro, y'all need to listen to my podcast today, because I got some folks who look like me, who know what the hell they're talking about, talk about this. So with that being said, go right ahead, Mr. Henderson.
I concur with a lot of what Nathan said a little earlier. A lot of the communities I've been working with around the country, the game has done changed a little bit. Apprenticeship dollars may not be what they were supposed to be, and the grant money may be impacted or will be impacted. But the fund that you have, the thing to remember is you have to keep the fundamentals of the project you want to pursue sound. That's all. The sound project fundamentals, the money is going to still continue to come to those communities because it's looking to work in those communities. I've got $500 million for projects, and I'm trying to fund them. Now, I like being able to capital stack with federal grant incentive dollars, but what I really look for are projects that are strong regardless of that, and they really impact the community, and the community is behind it, the municipality is behind it, the nonprofit sector is behind it, the resident community is behind it. Those fundamentals haven't changed, and as long as we have those fundamentals involved, Nathan, I think you'll concur with this, those projects should be funded, and if they come to us, will be funded.
Okay, Nate, I want you to come on back in here, because one of the things that's to both of you gentlemen has been troubling to me. I spoke with the Honorable Johnny Ford, who heads the historically black townships and settlements, which is about 106 black small towns. And I know, Nathan, we have had a little discussion about that because you just traveled to a number of those historically black towns and settlements. They don't have the capacity, they don't have the infrastructure. And one of the things that was supposed to be going out of the door was the funding for various organizations such as TSU, Texas Southern University. You have Emerald Cities, Dr. Denise Fairchild's organization. They have a collaboration where they were to do some of the same things your organization, Tony, does through some of your partnerships. Write these grants for these municipalities. Because that was one of the questions that came from me by Johnny Ford. He asked me, well, how do we get this money? I said, you got to apply for it. Well, if you don't have anybody that can write the grant proposal, if you can't pay a grant writer, then you're sort of short. So those are what my concerns are. Now, I know there are 18 Republican senators and congressmen that have signed on to a letter to the head of the Senate and the House, Johnson, asking them not to bother these projects because Biden strategically put those investments in these red states, and not one of these damn Republicans voted for the Inflation Reduction Act or Build Back Better legislation, which sort of gets under my collar when who do we have that we can go to through the Congressional Black Caucus that will even call congressional hearings on this thing? Because as the former president of the National Association of Blacks in Solar, I've been calling for the Congressional Black Caucus to have congressional black hearings on these issues about how does this and how are these programs, how how are these programs going to be implemented in these small rural communities with populations under 50,000 people? So, Nate, I'd love for you to jump in on that, and you can follow.
Mr. Bethea, I think that's a great question. And when you look at some of the proposals that came out of the Heritage Foundation, everyone needs to brace themselves that the environmental justice activities of the EPA very well may be defunded and eliminated altogether in terms of its external civil rights. Okay, you just have to take that on and understanding, and that what that means is that the projects that have already been started is going to need to be tied to some type of emergency or urgency situation if it's going to continue, and or it's going to have to be aligned with some of the Trump-era energy dominance agenda that he already had rescinded from that secretarial order of 3398, and then it reinstated the Trump DOI secretarial orders, which regards coal, offshore energy, onshore oil, and gas leases. I know everyone's saying, well, what does all that have to do with my program as an HBCU? You're going to have to start doing some energy. You're going to have to open up your renewable energies and understand that these are the ways you're going to have to fund those additional special projects if you are relying completely on grant funding. My true assessment, though, is that the climate change, although they're going to eliminate or try to eliminate some of the national oceanic departments that talk about climate change, it will not go anywhere. And I think it's important that we all remember that no matter how much the administration tried to downplay the COVID era, it did not go anywhere because it was, in fact, a true public health disaster. And so what we have to do is still be vigilant in what is going to be needed for this next turn of our country. But most importantly, we also are going to have to begin to look at how some of the projects that we've already got the initial investment on can start to make a different source of cash flow and start to generate income and remove itself from the reliance of the federal government. And I think that's going to be important, very much so, Tony. And I think it's one of those conversations that I think you probably have a little bit of better insight on, because when you're looking at private funding versus public funding and you're seeing how they're matching, there is a long-term pro forma that a private investor will use. And so when you're anticipating the removal of certain tax incentives and credit and other add-ons that will take the investor from investing $100 million to maybe decreasing that a bit more, to $50 million to offset it, I think it's important for even the HBCUs to take a look at other areas so that they can include themselves into a long-term sustainable financial plan that does, in fact, align with whatever administration that we're going to be having here. It does not heavily rely on just solely the environmental justice activity. And I think that's something that we're going to have to reckon with, and we should start reckoning with that now.
Yeah, I have to concur with that. And I think that the environmental justice community has been around for some 30, and we've had to deal with administrations as they come and as they go. And the arc of the environmental justice movement has been towards abundance, towards more money over the last 8 to 10 years. Now we're going to have to deal with that arc bending a bit and with less money. It doesn't take away from the urgency of what we have to do. It doesn't take away from our commitment levels. It just means that the federal government is not going to be funding as much as they have been, and we're going to have to work against some different procurement and regulations. But we still need to do what we need to do. And on that end, circling back to the question of Ron, there are organizations out there. I represent one that can actually help communities, help municipalities, help school districts, help universities for a nominal fee, write these grant proposals and get them into these agencies quickly so that we can take advantage of what's currently there, and then we'll be flexible enough to deal with the upcoming environment, the changes that are going to be involved. And then secondly, our municipalities, our school districts, our park districts, our universities have to begin to take advantage of those opportunities that aren't going to change. For example, since the late 70s, if you do an energy efficiency audit before you begin your project, and you get that audit performed by an IRS-designated energy auditing firm or individual, the federal and state government has to, this rule will not change, has to give you 15 times your first year's proposed energy savings to do the project. And municipalities and school districts and park districts out there, this is what you need to do. You need to take this approach. This will get your initial funding for your energy efficiency project, help pay for your solar project, help pay for your indoor air project. But that is primarily just go after and get the money that's not going anywhere. That's been there for 40 years, 50 years. Let's go get it.
Well, with that being said, Tony, I mean, y'all are giving, like my dear friend of mine, Joe Matters, used to say, y'all making it plain where the goats can get it. Now, I asked you gentlemen to give me 30 minutes. 30 minutes are gone. So I want to know if I can hold y'all over to my second segment of this show, but I've got to take a slight pause for the cause here on this platform, Solar Now in the Future, with its economic impact on Black America. And for my listening audience, that calling number is 646-668-2948. Once again, that calling number is 646-668-2948. And please remember to press 1 on your phone pad after dialing the calling number, because you'll be in the green room, and we want to bring you right in from the living room, from our living room, and set you down so we can have this in the studio, so we can have this discussion. So anyone who's out there can hear exciting and needed information going out after this historical setback to folks who look like me in America right now, because I'm very, very, very disturbed that our young people did vote. So I'm not going to put it on that. I'm going to put it on the I'm a baby boomer, so you got a group of folks between that and the very young folks, I guess from about 45 back to 35 or 55 to 30 or 35. I didn't see them at the polls, man. I mean, I voted last Saturday. I took my wife to the polls. We walked around in there, and I was disturbed then because I thought the numbers would be long lines. Yesterday, I went to Howard University, picked up my daughter because she didn't get out to vote, and because of what was going on at Howard, they had it shut down. She couldn't even move her car, so I went and picked her up, my grandson, and took her so she could vote. We got near my house. We got a poll right up the street. We drove right in. I saw nobody in line. It was a bad sign, and it was a beautiful day, so it was no excuse for folks not showing up. But when those numbers came in, and I started looking down at the demographics and the breakdowns of who voted for who, and I live in a very, very heavily populated historical area called Tacoma Park with a lot of Hispanics. They did not go to the polls and vote. And I can know that. I can say that without a doubt. They didn't go vote. So with that being said, we're going to take a slight pause for the cause here on Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America, and we'll be right back. welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the airways of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And I'm your host, Ronald, Bethea, and you know if you join us on a regular basis, the slogan for this show is there's power in numbers, and the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC captures that power for your financial benefit. The Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC serves as an economic blueprint for renewable energy companies, both large and small, along with an increasing market share for African and African American renewable energy companies to address the effects of high energy costs at our historically Black colleges and universities, to utilize Black-owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African and African men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also to educate the African and African American community locally and nationally about the economic impact of climate change and the need for environmental education through Black Talk radio programs such as Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. With that being said, Nathaniel, I know, and you and Mr. Henderson, y'all have been looking at this, and as sharp businessmen, I know that y'all have come together and have looked at some kind of contingencies around these issues. But how do you see some of these things playing out? As Tony, you were saying that there's money that's already in the pipeline, but any other appropriations that have not been already put into the budget that will depend on the next Congress to come in to approve it, that will impact that. So the monies that were already gone out to those entities that did receive funding, how do you see this playing out in terms of the tax credits in that type of situation?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a great question. The bottom line is nobody really knows. Nobody really knows. But what I foresee in my conversations with people at those organizations that receive that funding is that they want to get it out the door as quickly as possible. And that they're looking for solid projects to finance, because now more than ever, they need to make sure that those projects are actually managed properly and actually produce what the grants say they're going to produce, because they're going to probably be increased scrutiny placed upon these projects. Would you agree with that, Dave?
I would agree with that. I would definitely add that when it comes to tax incentives and tax credits, you have to also look at this other word called tax for billionaires. Okay, and these tax cuts are designed so that they will attract more businesses into the area in terms of us becoming a major manufacturer of energy itself, whether it's natural or whatever the energy source will be. Do I foresee that there will be a complete blanket removal of tax incentives and tax credits? No. Do I see that there will be blanket removal of tax cuts? No. In fact, they're going to increase tax cuts. I truly believe that most of, when it comes to the tax incentives for this particular administration, it's going to be based on part of the production of relying on drilling here in the United States. We already know that the EV market is going to take a hit. So if you are in the EV market and you don't have a solid plan in your programming, you're going to take a hit. That's one area I can say, because those tax cuts are going to be a benefit to the automakers. Okay, in the auto industry. And for me, I think that the biggest move that as an HBCU you can be making right now is really to align your projects with perhaps some of the funding that's going to be in line with the critical services that come with emergency planning and funding. And if you align yourself with that, and it may not be described as an energy program, but it may very well be an energy program. For example, what do I mean when I say that? I mean, if you are in a disaster situation and you now have to rebuild your community, well, it is going to be incumbent upon you to implement the green materials into the new construction. It will not be a mandated situation. election. Donald Trump is not going to be the president forever, which is according to our Constitution so far. But I think it's important to
wait a minute.
Right, but even
no, yeah, you said a whole lot there, bro. I didn't want to laugh, but it ain't funny. Go right ahead, brother. I apologize. Go right ahead.
Yeah, but if you remember when we had the opportunity, though,
That's
and you remember when
that's exactly what I'm talking about. Opportunity.
The opportunity zones, it didn't, even though those things got pushed to the back burner, they didn't completely go away, and we were able to revive it in the next administration. So that's why we kind of talked a little bit about that word asset protection, kind of finding a way to kind of shield your assets a little bit, whether it be gifts of equity or with the actual investments that you're putting in. But most importantly, I think personally, if I were in a position as an HBCU or as a nonprofit organization, or even Emerald City or any of these, I personally would be studying the OMB office and its circular and the acircular motions that actually do cost-benefit analysis. I would be honing in on that hard. So I know how the interagencies work together. I would be preparing myself to say, okay, if we're doing these, if he plans to do a mass deportation, if he plans to do a massive drilling situation, if he is not going to acknowledge climate change, then you're going to have to find a way from a corporate level to start to integrate or insulate your project so that they'll be shielded from the changes that happen politically, or it won't be so reliant on the appropriating of federal funding to secure complete those. That's what I will be doing right now.
And let me follow up on that. And through Ronald's organization, there are groups out there like mine, Imbalance, or GCA, Guaranteed Community Advisors, or Nerd Energy, that are absolutely going to be critical as you move forward, because we can bring the matching funding to the table that he's alluding to. All right, that's where we want to fund these types of projects, but they have to be done in a way that really makes sense. And we love working with organizations to do that. And in addition, remember the opportunity zone concept was something that Trump pushed very hard in his first administration. And that's his give back to the African American community. Here, now, a lot of those tax regulations are 2 to 3 years, and you can look for him to extend those, because it really provides tax credit to the developers to come to these communities and to do these projects. All right? And so for those municipalities that have opportunity zones in them, you need to laser focus on those opportunity zones and do your project there, because it will entice funding groups to come in and participate. Okay?
Well, gentlemen, one of the biggest concerns that I have is, how do you get our presidents at our HBCUs to park their egos at the door and listen to gentlemen such as yourselves, who are in the business, in the field, and you're dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. Let me give you an example. We went down to myself, Dr. Lillian Abrams, which was one of the founding members of the National Association of Blacks in Solar. She has the leading African-American environmental engineering consulting firm in the country, Peer Consultants. Before the so-called, I call it the plandemic, some folks refer to it as the plandemic, she has 5 offices in the U.S., and she had 2 on the continent of Africa, and she needed projects. Went down to Livingstone. We looked at projects there. We went to South Carolina, and we looked at projects. Now, I hail from the state of South Carolina, and this is why I wanted to go here. Tony, you looked at the specific project that we talked to the mayor of Chester, South Carolina, Mayor Williams, and he drug his feet around getting back in a timely manner in responding to the proposal opportunities that y'all provided for his municipalities. And I know they can't do any better. Now, case in point, we move on to Livingstone University, which is located in Salisbury, North Carolina. 600 they had 600 acres. They wanted to do a large-scale solar farm. Before you do a solar farm or anything else, you need to do an energy audit. Well, that's a red light when you get to dealing with our HBCUs, because most of the time, when you go to these HBCU campuses, and when you get to dealing around with the issue of utilities, water, sewage, electricity, you're talking about they don't even have a sustainability director. They will have someone that may be running that department, but they won't have anyone that will deal with the area of renewables. And in North Carolina and in South Carolina, I'm speaking about those two states because I know what North Carolina did. North Carolina, so-called red state, they let Duke Energy, which controls the marketplace, call the shots. So they pulled the amount of renewables for military installations, colleges, and universities, which you gentlemen know is something called behind the meter. As long as they're going behind the meter, not a problem. In the state of South Carolina, my dear brother, Congressman Clyburn, which I have a great deal of respect for, Biden bought $10 billion of new investment to the state of South Carolina. And they were depending on the nuclear power plant that was supposed to be built on the Santee River to provide that energy for the state for the next 25 years and to, in fact, be the source to power these new manufacturing facilities. Well, that blew up. You had $11 billion in cost overruns because of something called crooks. They sent the entire head of the Public Service Commission to jail. State of South Carolina. This is true. I ain't making none of this up. And anybody can fact check it. The bottom line is now they went from less than 100 megawatts in clean energy to about almost 1,700 megawatts for the state of South Carolina. 5 years ago, Rutherford, who is the head of the Congressional Black Caucus in the state of South Carolina, had congressional hearings with the head of the Solar Industry Trade Association, SEA. Young white guy out of Charleston, South Carolina. We contacted his firm about looking at several projects, and they were all over the place. Oh, well, that's too far from a substation. Bam, when I know they're building large-scale megawatt farms in the desert, there ain't no substations nowhere. They do what they want to do. But we understood because of the rural co-ops and their control over the marketplace. You got 23 co-ops in South Carolina. You got one that controls the main power grid's transfer cost to men. So you gentlemen know how that game is played. Long and short, corporation of Australia, their headquarters in Charlotte, North Carolina, called Albemarle Corporation, has committed $1.4 billion to build a lithium manufacturing plant for batteries for Toyota. Toyota has committed in North Carolina, not too far from Chester, within 100 miles, in Liberty, they're investing $20 billion to build a EV charging battery manufacturing facility. The question becomes, gentlemen, how can all of these things take place and we as black folk be totally left out the loop because our mayors, our congressmen don't, and our HBCUs don't have the vision or insight to look at how they can link up with these projects, and you got little small white junior colleges hooking up with these folks getting billions of dollars investment tied into them. So I guess this is some of the stuff y'all are talking about, how these schools are going to have to leverage what's going on in their environment.
Why don't you take that, Nick?
Yeah, I think it's important to just first backtrack on the solar farm. I understand that, Department of Energy has been working solar farms before the bipartisan infrastructure bill advances, right? It's not something that has not been discussed already for strengthening the grid here for America on the resiliency market. And you can see an example of that with the University of Knoxville. And this is what I would tell folks, especially my HBCU presidents, to come to the table. And if you haven't studied how Knoxville has created it, there are solar farms in Tennessee. And this was under former Governor Rick Perry, as he was the secretary of the DOE at that time. This is, I think, was around 2016. It's important to understand that the president-elect Donald Trump at this point is not completely opposed to strengthening this grid or using solar farms as a means of being able to build a resilient community. But remember, resiliency, number one, it should be and is part of the Department of Homeland Security. Okay, so keep that in mind. There is a resiliency piece for the Department of Homeland Security. And then the second thing to keep in mind is that former Governor Rick Perry, as the Secretary of Energy, was one of those proponents and one of those advocates in that. And you can see how the University of Knoxville, when they went about designing their co-op in their solar farm, and you can see it right down there. And I've traveled down there, Mr. Bethea, between Nashville and Memphis, and I've seen these solar farms myself that have been integrated into the system and actually have, not just they're actually integrated on the highway. So the solar farms itself can still be a major project for universities. My advice would be to follow some of the rhythm and some of the structure that was done by the University of Knoxville, because that will most likely be what they follow again. Now, I can't obviously guarantee that, but what I can tell you is that what I did see is that Paul Ryan was involved with that. You had Senator Cruz who was involved in that. You had Senator Lamar Alexander from Tennessee who was involved in that. And you had other folks from Oklahoma that were all in part of this building a solar farm. So how do we do it? There will have to be some concessions made on the HBCU side in terms of how they work with these counterparts. And I'm not saying these folks are still going to be in it, but it is important to note that we have done this before, and there were universities who have done this previously. And I do think that if we begin to kind of start to build a coalition, and I would say to start to do that now, because if you do it now, you still can take advantage of those Justice 40 tax incentives. Just because they go back and roll it next year and he eliminates them, if he does eliminate it, doesn't mean that the university won't be able to still take advantage of that in that next year or that coming year if they start to make those decisions between now and then. You see what I'm saying? So I personally, if I was a university president, I would be now starting to align myself with some of these red states. But, I mean, it is what it's got to be, and actually figure out how they were able to do that, and then also be putting them in a place, because it is going to be probably one of those conversations where there is going to be a co-op that needs to be developed, and it's going to have to be protected from another source other than just a simple grant fund. And so that would be my move personally. Study what Knoxville University did in conjunction with the state, and then begin to start to model your relationship and co-op according to that. That's what I would say.
Well, Tony, we've got about four more minutes. I'm going to give you two, and then I'm going to close with the last two, because I think that the information that you and Brother Nathaniel Daly has provided for our listening audience today is a breath of fresh air, because we need some good news, because I thought it was a nightmare on my street when I went to bed last night. So I'm glad I was able to today to bring a little sunshine up with the sun. So with that being said, Brother Henderson, What are your closing statements around the things that Brother Nathaniel just shared with us?
Yeah. Thank you for your time, and thank you for this podcast. I think our people need to come together and talk about these things. Now, I've had several conversations. I have several conversations ongoing with HBCUs to do projects across the United States. And some are really doing creative projects. As a team down at Morehouse, as a dynamite project, we're working with Microsoft, Georgia Power, and Southern Company to do some interesting things now. And I sense that there's a lot going on at the HBCU that people like myself and Nathan may not know about. And I think it's incumbent upon us to spend more time getting into those institutions and to see where we can go. And I think if we do that, we can assist in helping them do the things that Nathan laid out. And I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you both for taking time from your very, very busy schedules, because I know how busy both of you gentlemen are, to join me here on this platform, Solar Now in the Future, with its economic impact on Black America. And even though no one bothered to call 646-668-2948, this will be up on YouTube, live stream. I'm live streaming it. It will also be up Facebook, Twitter, and links, and all forms of social media, and it'll get out there to the masses. So if I can get people to begin to listen in, and I can get the numbers up, that's what I'm working on right now, because this information that you gentlemen have shared today has very, very been invaluable as far as I'm concerned. So with that being said, I want to thank both of you for taking time from your busy schedules to join me here on the platform of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And so with that being said, gentlemen, y'all have a blessed day, and I'll be talking to both of you in the very, very near future. Okay. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to Mr. Nathaniel Daly. Before you go, both of you gentlemen go, could you please give out some web addresses and some information so people can get in contact with you?
Sure. My name is Tony Henderson, HENDERSON, and you can reach me at 2030.inbalance2030.com. And you go there, you can reach me and find out more information about some of the things we talked about today.
Okay. Go ahead right on, Nathaniel. Go right ahead.
And for anybody who wants to follow me, you can follow me in two different areas. You can either subscribe to preparednessplanning.org, which is the easy way to get in touch with me, or I would advise go to the Black Wall Street because I do podcast there every Monday as well. And I teach on the procurement cycle. So if you go to Black Wall Street USA and look for the control regeneration model, you'll find a lot more lectures that go into some of the conversations that we are having here today. So that's two ways I say to get in touch with me. Or you can always reach out to Inbalance 2030 and get in touch with Mr. Henderson, because I'm sure he'll be in touch with me, or Ron Bethea. So I appreciate the time to be able to spend with you. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, and y'all have a blessed day. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of our show today here on the platform of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. You've been listening to Mr. Tony Henderson, Mr. Nathan Daly, and these gentlemen are doing outstanding work. But the work must continue, ladies and gentlemen. We're in for the fight of our lives. Let's be clear. I've got an 11-year-old grandson. That's what it's about for me with our young African-American youth coming today. We can't throw up our hands. With that being said, once again, this show was brought to you by the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative, the National Association of Blacks in Solar, and the Black Sports Legends Foundation. Until next week, we always say, go in peace as we close another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America.